continue to introduce yourself in the chat if you'd like, and tell us where you're joining from. We do have live interpretation in Spanish and English for this event. So for anyone needing interpretation, please go down to the right-hand corner on the globe sign. And we do have one speaker who will be presenting in Spanish. So for anyone needing a Spanish to English translation, please join the interpretation channel for English at the right-hand corner. Okay, we're 1 minute past the hour, so I think we're going to go ahead and start our meeting. So again, thank you so much for everyone who's joining us today. And we are part of the member connectivity subgroup of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird group. So we created this group really as an idea to keep our members connected between our biennial conference and just get together and talk about shorebirds, really. So thank you so much for being at one of our very first events. This is our second webinar in the series, and we're hoping to put on several more this year or next year now. But now I have the honor of presenting two speakers who are doing really, really interesting and relevant work for shorebird conservation, really synchronizing habitat creation with working lands. And so I want to thank you so much to two of our speakers, Jason Hoeksema and Joaquín Aldabe. So Dr. Joaquín Aldabe is a professor at the Centro Universitario Regional del Este in Uruguay and conservation specialist for Manomet's Flyway program in the Western Hemisphere. And he is investigating how to harmonize bird habitat creation and conservation with livestock production in Uruguay during the non-breeding period. So he'll be our first speaker, and then followed by our second speaker, Dr. Jason Hoeksema, who is a professor at the University of Mississippi and founder and president of Delta Windbirds, which is a nonprofit dedicated to protecting and creating wetlands and really measuring how ecosystem services can be created by creating habitat for shorebirds during the migratory period. So we will pass to our first speaker, Dr. Joaquín Aldabe, and then we're going to reserve the discussion period for after both of our speakers. So please keep any questions you have and feel free to enter them into the chat, and we'll get to those after both of our speakers. So with that, our very first speaker is going to be in Spanish. So for anyone needing English to Spanish to English translation, please go to that interpretation button at the bottom right. And I'm going to pass it to Dr. Joaquín Aldabe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tara, and thank you all of you for organizing this very important event. So that helps us being connected. So I'm going to switch to Spanish because I think I'll be more fluent for sure. Bien, entonces yo les voy a presentar el trabajo que estamos realizando en Uruguay para promover la conservación de esta especie, que es el playerito canela, Calidris subruficolis, que es un ave migratoria de larga distancia que nidifica en el Ártico y tiene sus áreas no reproductivas en los pastizales costeros de Uruguay, sur de Brasil y Argentina. Es una especie muy delicada porque presenta declinaciones muy relevantes en términos de tamaño poblacional, pero además porque es muy específica en sus requerimientos ecológicos. Necesita pastizales cortos, en lugares abiertos, sin árboles, cerca de espejos de agua, tienen que ser planos. Entonces esas características no se dan en todos lados. Nuestro objetivo es conservar el hábitat de en 5 lagunas costeras del este de Uruguay. En verde pueden ver mapeamos eh, las planicies con pastizales que están en el entorno de estas lagunas costeras y ahí se realizan actividades ganaderas. ¿Sí? Estas planicies sumadas, las 4 lagunas, más o menos representan el 25% de la población o sostienen el 25% de la población global de esta especie. Entonces, así es el ambiente en el cono sur de esta especie. Son lugares planos, muy abiertos y con pasto corto. Son todos lugares privados, es decir, hay propietarios, productores de ganadería, eh, y por lo tanto tenemos que trabajar con ellos para promover, con los productores para promover la conservación. Entonces, nosotros tenemos un programa que incluye biólogos, ingenieros agrónomos, comunicadores, y a los propios productores. Y la misión que tenemos es que los productores estén más conectados entre sí, em, entre las lagunas e incluso dentro de las lagunas, de cada laguna. Los productores no estaban muy conectados, no sabían qué hacían unos, qué hacían otros. Y también nos planteamos como misión que ellos estén orgullosos de lograr un manejo productivo adecuado en términos de productividad animal de vacas, y también que al mismo tiempo se sientan orgullosos por albergar en sus campos aves migratorias de importancia internacional. Bien, nuestra primera pregunta para lograr conciliar la producción de ganado y la conservación es ¿cuál es la altura óptima de pasto que necesita el playerito canela? ¿Sí? Entonces, realizamos un estudio en donde seleccionamos en la Laguna de Rocha, trabajamos en un establecimiento y cada uno a la izquierda en este mapa se pueden ver los potreros, ¿sí? O plots o paddocks. Em, y durante 4 años hicimos conteos de aves. Entonces, en verde son los potreros que tienen pasto corto, menor a 10 centímetros, y en rojo los potreros con pasto alto. Ven que esto lo hicimos para el Playerito Canela y para el Chorlo Pampa. El primer número es el del Chorlo Pampa y el segundo es el del Playerito Canela. Entonces, se ve que coincide, ¿no? Que cuando hay pasto corto, en general hay aves, pero cuando el pasto está más alto, que es en rojo, no hay aves. Y eso, la altura del pasto es muy dinámica, y eso influye fuertemente en la distribución de estas especies dentro de un establecimiento. Vean que en el año 2012 el pasto estaba muy alto debido a las precipitaciones. Cuando tenemos eventos climáticos del Niño, hay más lluvias en primavera y por lo tanto el pasto crece más y en la primavera del sur. Y el hábitat, si las vacas no dan abasto, el pasto queda muy alto y el hábitat queda no adecuado para estas especies, que se concentraron en unos poquitos potreros y en total, números más bajos. Entonces, a partir de estos datos, generamos estas, funciones que relacionan la probabilidad de ocurrencia con la altura del pasto y vemos que por debajo de los 5 centímetros, la probabilidad de ocurrencia es de 40% o más. ¿Sí? Y también vimos que los lugares o los potreros que tenían muchos árboles tampoco eran elegidos por estas aves, ¿no? Entonces, por encima de un 40% de cobertura arbórea, la probabilidad de ocurrencia es muy bajita. Eso quiere decir que necesitan lugares abiertos para detectar, seguramente relacionado con la necesidad de detectar a los depredadores con bastante distancia para poder escapar. Y, mm, y bueno, las diferencias de altura de pasto a veces son mínimas, unos pocos centímetros, como se puede ver en esta imagen, donde se ve a la izquierda un pasto de unos 10 centímetros y a la derecha un pasto de unos 3 4 centímetros. Esta diferencia ya es suficiente para que las aves no usen acá, el lado izquierdo, y sí usen el lado de la derecha. Bueno, las lagunas de Uruguay y sur de Brasil tienen dos secciones. Una sección que le llamamos planicies o campos bajos, que se inundan cuando crece el nivel de la laguna, y una parte que es alta, en donde eh, cuando crece la laguna no ocurre inundación. Acá tenemos una foto en donde se ve la parte alta y la parte baja. La parte baja de las lagunas, que es la que está más cerca del espejo de agua, es donde están las mayores densidades de aves playeras como el payerito canela, el chorlopán. Bueno, la ganadería sabemos que es importante para estructurar la altura de la vegetación, pero no siempre es suficiente. Vean, en esta situación en donde el manejo que se realiza promueve un pastizal bastante alto, como de 30 centímetros, en relación a uno más corto de 5 centímetros. Y además, hay una planta que se llama junco, que es una especie nativa, pero que está colonizando y ocupando las planicies de inundación y por lo tanto está eliminando el hábitat. Y las vacas no lo comen. Entonces, nuestra idea ha sido trabajar con los productores para poder resolver estos desafíos de gestión. Nuestra primera pregunta y objetivo es cómo podemos generar que las aves tengan buenas condiciones de hábitat y al mismo tiempo que se logren buenos desempeños productivos. O sea, los productores, el primer objetivo de ellos es la producción agropecuaria, la producción de ganado. Entonces, cualquier manejo que nosotros propongamos, si no tiene un beneficio para el productor, no va a ser considerado, porque no tenemos otro tipo de incentivos. Por ejemplo, incentivos fiscales para la conservación no existen en Uruguay, ¿sí? Entonces tenemos que arreglárnosla con la habilidad para encontrar manejos que estén orientados a conservar y a producir al mismo tiempo. Bueno, específicamente queremos saber eh, cómo, cómo lograr que en los campos bajos haya pasto corto de menos de 6 centímetros y en los campos más altos, que no hay tantas aves, el pasto esté más alto. ¿Por qué necesitamos que el pasto esté corto abajo y alto en los campos altos? Bueno, el pasto corto abajo es para las aves, para que lo puedan usar, y el pasto alto arriba es una reserva de forraje para que el productor no se quede sin alimento para el ganado. ¿Sí? Entonces, ¿cómo lograr esta situación? Fue lo que nos planteamos y para eso utilizamos el conocimiento que nosotros teníamos de las especies en que fueron difundidos en publicaciones científicas, eh, pero también, y acá es muy importante esta parte, incorporamos el conocimiento ecológico local de los productores y también en la información agronómica disponible. Muchas veces hay un conocimiento muy profundo por parte del productor sobre su granja, sobre su propiedad, sobre cómo crece el pasto, cuál es la dinámica temporal, qué necesita la vaca y en qué momento. Y todo ese conocimiento lo aprovechamos para diseñar e identificar estas prácticas. Entonces, más allá de los papers, que yo creo que es una herramienta muy importante para promover el manejo de los hábitats, para poder tomar decisiones basadas en ciencia, yo creo que es muy importante también incorporar otras formas de generación de conocimiento, como por ejemplo la aproximación de coinnovación, que básicamente consiste en el desarrollo y diseño de prácticas en su contexto, ¿ah? En el predio, y junto con las personas que manejan los sistemas. Es una forma relativamente nueva de generar conocimiento que se opone de alguna manera a la tradición en muchos lugares de que se desarrollaban las buenas prácticas para la producción eh, fuera de su contexto y se traían como un paquete que se tenía que aplicar tal cual había sido diseñado en cada predio y no estaba adaptado a las condiciones locales, a las características eh, del predio en términos de las personas que lo habitan, a sus objetivos, a sus capacidades y habilidades de trabajo. Entonces es muy importante esta nueva aproximación que se llama coinnovación. También hay un abordaje de similar nombre, que es parecido, que se llama coproducción y que básicamente consiste en trabajar codo a codo con productores para encontrar conocimiento que permita manejar eh, los sistemas de una manera adecuada. Y yo creo que este abordaje puede ser muy interesante para trabajar en conservación de biodiversidad, eh, porque he visto en varias ocasiones que cuando traemos una- un objetivo de conservación a un predio, generalmente nos pasa que el productor lo ve con un poco de rechazo o no logra incorporarlo en su sistema. Eh, entonces, cuando las cosas vienen como de arriba hacia abajo, sin mediar con la opinión y la visión del productor, son más difíciles de integrar a los sistemas. Sin embargo, cuando el productor hace parte de ese diseño de las prácticas, aplicando su conocimiento y ajustándolo a su situación particular, creo que las cosas pueden funcionar mucho mejor. Y la coinnovación se ha usado muy poco para la conservación de la biodiversidad y me parece que es una herramienta bastante adecuada. Este tema de la coinnovación tiene sus raíces, al menos en parte, en 1970, un pedagogo brasileño que se llamaba Paulo Freire, publicó un libro que se llama Pedagogía del Oprimido, en donde él concibe a los educandos, a los estudiantes, eh, como actores clave y activos en su educación o en el involucramiento del proceso creativo. Entonces, eh, es interesante, él plantea la educación como de dos maneras. Una educación que le llamaba bancaria, en donde viene el técnico, el especialista y deposita, o el docente y deposita el conocimiento en la persona y esa persona simplemente lo absorbe y lo repite. Y por otro lado, la educación basada en problema o educación problematizadora, en donde el educando o el productor, en este caso, es invitado a pensar, a reflexionar, a lograr una visión crítica de la situación para poder resolver y para poder avanzar en el proceso creativo de conocimiento. Entonces, yo creo que esto es muy aplicable a la situación biólogos o técnicos y productores. Bien, estas son algunas de las estrategias de manejo que hemos promovido junto con los productores de las lagunas costeras, aplicando, em, alam- eh, estableciendo o instalando alambrados para poder controlar la intensidad de pastoreo y poder mantener el pasto corto en los campos bajos y así favorecer a las aves, o también em, hacer agricultura en las partes altas, ¿sí? Y lo más lejos posible de vías de drenaje o arroyos, cañadas, que llevarían los químicos que se utilizan en los cultivos hacia los campos bajos. Además, cuando se inunda la laguna, si el pasto ya se lo comió el ganado, no lo pierde, porque cuando está inundada la laguna, ese pasto se tiende a degradar, se tiende a pudrir y por lo tanto el productor se pierde la oportunidad de haberlo convertido a kilos de carne. Entonces, comerse el pasto en el bajo antes de la inundación es una situación que le favorece a las aves, playeras, y al mismo tiempo permite que el productor aproveche ese pasto hacia la producción. También identificamos junto con los productores que hay algunas especies, como las ovejas y los caballos, que son ideales para promover pasto corto. Y también una recomendación importante es que como hay pasto corto, eh, hay poca cantidad de comida, necesitamos que el ganado que esté ahí comiendo, las vacas, estén en un estado nutricional con baja demanda de alimento, como es el caso cuando están fuera de la época, cuando están en los últimos 2 meses de lactancia o los primeros 2 meses, de, perdón, últimos 2 meses de preñez y primeros 2 meses de lactancia. Ahí tienen pocos requerimientos o pocas demandas, o no son tan altas las demandas de alimento, por lo tanto pueden comer en estos campos bajos que hay poca comida, y no se resentirían en términos de producción. Todo esto lo reunimos en un manual que de nuevo recoge el conocimiento local de los productores, conocimiento productivo, ecológico, y bueno, y los participamos en la redacción también, así que los invito a revisarlo, que fue publicado en el año 2024. Y para cerrar esta parte, nos importa mucho la producción. Entonces, nuestra pregunta fue, estos pastizales cortos, ¿le han de comer lo suficiente a las vacas? ¿Generan suficiente biomasa vegetal? Bueno, los trabajos previos sugieren que cuando la altura del pasto, como se puede ver en este gráfico, cuando la altura del pasto está por encima de los 9 centímetros, hay mayor forraje, mayor cantidad de alimento y eso es bueno para el ganado. Nosotros estamos promoviendo alturas de pasto por debajo de los 5 centímetros, o sea que tendrían menos comida. Aún así, parece haber una particularidad en estos pastizales que, de las lagunas costeras, parecen escapar a la regla general de cuanto más alto, más forraje, y nosotros medimos mediante jaulas de exclusión y corte de pasto, cortamos con tijera y lo secamos, y vimos que cuando el pasto está a 3 centímetros de altura, produce bastante similar a cuando el pasto está por encima de los 6 centímetros de altura. Entonces, aparentemente, eh, el pasto corto produce la misma cantidad de pasto que el pasto alto. Además, en estos lugares, estos campos bajos, hay otra vegetación acuática que el ganado aprovecha que permite lograr buenos desempeños productivos. Sin embargo, no hemos constatado si esta producción de pasto se convierte en buen desempeño del ganado. Es decir, si el hecho de que haya esta cantidad de pasto se traduce en más kilos de carne o en más terneros producidos o en mejor condición corporal del ganado. Y eso es una pregunta abierta que nos gustaría, que estamos haciendo un proyecto ahora mismo para poder responder. Sabemos que la producción de pasto es buena, pero no sabemos si eso se traduce en un buen desempeño animal. Y para el productor eso es súper importante. Bien, me parece que voy a cortar por acá para que nos quede el espacio de preguntas e intercambio. Y ya me comí algunos minutos, así que bueno, ojalá que podamos tener un lindo eh, eh, instancia de más diálogo e intercambio sobre estos temas. Muchas gracias.
Thanks so much, Joaquin, for that awesome and fascinating presentation. We really appreciate it. And like we said at the beginning, we are going to hold questions until the end, but feel free to put questions in the chat for Joaquin. And we're going to pass it off to Jason Hoeksema now, who will present about his work. And thank you all for being here.
Hey, I want to start first by acknowledging various partners and sources of funding. So my affiliation is with the University of Mississippi and with the nonprofit Delta Windbirds. A key research partners have been at the USDA Research Laboratory here in Oxford, Mississippi, as well as at Mississippi State, and with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. We've had funding to support the work I'm going to talk about from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, from and also state wildlife grants from the state of Mississippi and the state of Alaska. Let's see. Okay, so just to set the geography where this work is taking place, this is in what we locally call the Mississippi Delta, which is the lower Mississippi alluvial valley or river basin. And that map on the right is from eBird data, just showing concentration of least sandpipers during fall migration. But it's a major stopover region for numerous shorebird species in the mid-continent, both during their southward migration and their northward migrations. Here, we, in our conservation efforts, have focused on trying to develop habitat for migratory shorebirds on working lands. And we focused especially during the autumn migration because in our region, spring is quite wet and there's a lot of water on the landscape, but in the fall, it tends to be very dry. And so habitat that can be provided in the fall is heavily utilized. We have focused in recent years in working with crop farmers to incentivize post-harvest flooding of crop fields. And for a longer time, we've also worked with waterfowl hunters to develop practices on private lands for managing impoundments for shorebirds, especially during the fall migration. One thing we've worked on in recent years with crop farmers is developing a contract structure to that would help incentivize earlier flooding, because one challenge that we have found is that it's a very difficult period in the fall when farmers are harvesting their crops. They're very busy, and this is also when the peak numbers of birds are coming through. And a big challenge is to get farmers to prioritize making bird habitat during a very busy time of the year. It's very understandable that they would need to focus on other aspects of their operations. So we have a tiered contract structure that incentivizes earlier flooding after fall crops are harvested. I want to highlight some results from a research project that has been ongoing in one way or another since about 2018, focusing on farms that grow corn and soybeans, especially in Sunflower County, but also surrounding counties in the Mississippi part of the Delta. Just to explain a little bit about the experimental design for this research, we started out really with one farm and two different sites on that farm. That expanded in 2021 out to 4 farm sites in the region. And in recent years, we've been working with about 8 to 10 different farm sites across this area. And in 2025, also starting to work on comparing farm sites to non-agricultural wetlands that shorebirds also use. The experimental treatments that we implemented in 2021 to 2024 are depicted here. We have focused whenever we can on working with farmers that have access to surface water sources so that habitat for shorebirds doesn't contribute to groundwater depletion, which is a growing issue in our region. So more than 200 farms in our region have tailwater systems where they have a series of ditches that drain water from agricultural fields and then pumps to store that water in what is referred to as a tailwater reservoir. And then we incentivize the farmers to pump excess water from the reservoir back out onto some of their fields to create temporary shorebird habitat or pop-up wetlands. We've used an experimental design for data collection where we have chosen at every site a dry control field, a passive flood field where the water control structure is blocked to catch rainfall, but we don't pump water onto it, and then pumping actively water onto the fields in the fall, in the winter, or both. Here's a quick animation to show the dynamics of flooding on a couple of these fields during the season. This is running from roughly early September through the typical flooding period in the fall, which is usually mid-November. And then we have often extended the flooding period through January, which provides habitat for wintering shorebirds as well. And you can see that water levels fluctuate up and down depending on evaporation and pumping by the farmers and rainfall. So this research that I'm about to present just a few results from has been implemented by quite a lot of different people. The guy on the right is a key collaborator, Jason Taylor, who is now here at the University of Mississippi, and Victoria Blocker on the top left, Pablo Bacon and Rachel Anderson on the bottom left, and they're representative of a teams of students and volunteers that have helped with this work over the last few years. Here are some key results from especially efforts that Jason Taylor's team was making to document ecosystem services that may be provided by this temporary shorebird habitat management practice. And it turns out that one of the key results here is that when you block the drains on these agricultural fields, which is necessary to create shorebird habitat, one of the key impacts of that is to greatly reduce the runoff of dissolved nutrients and sediment loads in the runoff water. So suspended sediments here, total phosphorus, dissolved inorganic nitrogen, phosphates, all of which you can see in the control fields, which are the red dots, are quite a lot higher. So when it rains, and this is mostly during storm events, when it rains, we get a lot of runoff of soil sediment and dissolved nutrients. And this can contribute to downstream eutrophication problems, dissolved oxygen being depleted, and ultimately to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And meanwhile, in the flooded fields, this does not happen. In flooded fields, the runoff is greatly reduced overall, and the concentrations of sediment and nutrients in those runoff waters are much smaller. We also have found that, in general, flooding of the fields has very little effect on crop yields. This was a concern with quite a few farmers that we talked to before implementing this practice. At one farm, this is our first farm that we worked on regularly, James Failing's farm, we have actually seen a fairly consistent increase in crop yields, especially of soybeans, following flooding compared to control fields. So control is on the left here, flooded fall and winter flooding on the right, and each pair of dots that are the same shape is a particular year, and the crop yields in bushels, the soybean yields in bushels of control field compared to a flooded field. And we've seen that really consistently at that site. At other sites, it's been much more variable and inconsistent, but the general trend is that there's no effect on crop yield across all the farms that we work on. All the blue dots at the bottom are soybeans. We don't have as much data on corn, but those are shown at the top. So this was actually a big relief to find that there was no effect on crop yield, or sometimes a positive effect, because that was one of the major concerns that farmers had about partnering with us on this practice. Other benefits reported by farmers include faster crop residue breakdown. And we have a decomposition experiment that we conducted last year to confirm that and quantify it. Increased soil moisture early in the crop season on flooded fields, weed suppression, and softer soil for planting in the spring. So quite a few meaningful benefits and very few complaints from the farmers about any issues or problems that they had. We've conducted waterbird surveys, as you might expect. This is Emma Counts, who was one of our central waterbird counters for multiple years. Others involved are listed there as well, who have contributed to collecting those data. And typically we survey every 2 weeks in the fall. We've documented 19 different species of shorebirds using these flooded field sites, 15 species of ducks and geese, including a key species, which is blue-winged teal, which uses a very similar habitat to shorebirds and is a game species with a special hunting season in the fall here in Mississippi. So farmers actually have an incentive to create teal habitat for hunting that also helps shorebirds. Some specific data from Emma's work showing just simply here higher shorebird abundances on the flooded fields, both fall flood and fall winter. This is shorebird abundance during the fall season. During the winter, one interesting result that Emma found was that we had higher shorebird abundances on fields that had been flooded in the fall. This is abundance in the winter. So at least in these couple of years here, shorebirds in the winter seem to prefer fields that have been flooded for a couple of months prior compared to just the winter flood field, which is shown here on the right. And from survey data here from Nora Bruce, this is data on a few specific species. Least sandpiper is our most abundant species, with some average count data shown on the left. Lesser yellowlegs is sometimes quite abundant on these sites. And then we have a smattering of other species that are quite consistently found at these sites. We have implemented in recent years a study to focus on shorebird health, stopover and movement tracking using capture and tagging and sampling from the captured birds. So using radio tags to estimate stopover duration. And of course, occasionally we are lucky to see a hit on a Motus tower somewhere else in the world. GPS tracking tags to follow local landscape movement to understand the relative importance of our flooded fields compared to other types of sites that the shorebirds might be using. And we've just begun tracking long distance migration of shorebirds who use our sites using longer distance tracking tags. And then of course, we're sampling body condition data from the captured birds, and we've just begun also taking blood samples to start looking for pesticides and potential relations of those loads of pesticides with health metrics that we can find in the blood samples as well. So we have an awesome operation, usually about 25 volunteers. We operate for 9 or 10 days each fall. I'll be heading off for our final session of the year just tomorrow morning, in fact, with our team. Focal species for that work include the Wilson snipe, which is a fall migrant, but also a wintering resident here, a non-breeding resident here, and showing just some of the tracking data. This is using Druid Bluetooth tags. And the snipe and the Dunlin, but especially the Dunlin, tend to use a lot of other sites in addition to our flooded fields. But the snipe do really focus a lot on our flooded field sites, and our flooded field sites end up being hubs of activity for both species as they move across the landscape and locally use other sites as well. Those data are just beginning to be synthesized now. It's really new, so I don't have very quantitative conclusions yet from those data. Lesser yellowlegs is a focal species of interest, but we are not very good at catching them yet. So we don't have very many data points on lesser yellowlegs. We're going to start implementing whoosh net trapping, hopefully tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. Occasionally we have gotten lucky. Here's a lesser yellowlegs with a Motus tag that flew directly to Panama after a couple of days spent on our field sites. And lesser yellowlegs seems to be very localized when it's here in its movement. So this is one bird that was here for 5 days last fall, and it basically didn't move outside of these 2 fields during the 5 days it was here. And then it immediately left, and then it left the area not to be detected again. The track up to the left was a high elevation exploration the day before it left. Least sandpiper is also a focal species. We consider the least sandpiper a common species that we want to make sure remains common, as well as a potential indicator species. We capture a lot of them, and so we can use them as somewhat of a proxy for what might be going on more generally with the other migratory shorebirds using these sites. So the least sandpipers are our focus right now for blood sampling. We have our highest sample size for radio tag data from least sandpiper and a lot of body condition data to go with it. I invite you to visit our MODIS project page. We have 2 MODIS towers that operate regularly at our field sites, and we're about to expand during the next year and add additional ones. And this project page can show you some of the cool detections that have happened either with our birds or with other people's birds at our sites. We have done quite a bit of invertebrate sampling to understand the food base for shorebirds at these sites, with quite a lot of different students involved in that sampling over the last 5 or 6 years. One conclusion that some of Emma Counts' analyses revealed is that we do see a positive relationship between shorebird abundance and chironomid abundances across sites, but a big question remaining is what is the relative habitat quality of these agricultural sites for shorebirds compared to other wetlands that they might have access to or might prefer. So that is the current focus of this some research this fall by my graduate student Oyinike Oyejide, who's pictured here, and Selena Zhao was heavily involved with the fieldwork this fall as well. So those results hopefully will be emerging in the next couple of years. But we're looking at invertebrate community composition and diversity across both agricultural and non-agricultural sites, wetlands that lesser yellowlegs are utilizing. We have had some successes influencing habitat management policy in the region from some of these results. We've engaged quite a lot with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service to inform the modification and updating of available conservation practices that farmers can sign up for through EQIP and other conservation practices supported under the Farm Bill. And this is just one example. EQIP 644 was updated based on our data to include a fall flooding option targeted to shorebirds. It previously only had an option for winter flooding. We also have conducted economic assessments of these practices to better understand what it really costs a farmer. These numbers here are maximums, really, and quite a few farmers are finding ways to do it less expensively, but we want to have the full potential costs to be transparent so that farmers can make a clear choice about what they're getting involved in. I also invite you to watch a short documentary that was created recently about this project that was really done very well by the people at Mississippi State University in their television production team, called Balancing Act. That's available on Vimeo online. And yeah, this QR code is for the Delta Windbirds website. I want to credit also Larry Pace, a local photographer, for his excellent photographs, including this least sandpiper standing on what is, I believe, the upturned roots of a corn stalk in a flooded field in Mississippi. So thanks for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thanks so much, Jason. That was also super fascinating, and we'll open it up. Anyone can come off mute to ask questions or put them in the chat and we'll read them out loud. But I wanted to start off just asking you all, both of you, Jason and Joaquin, how do you think a species-centric approach brings a different angle to applied management research as opposed to a more ecosystem-centric habitat restoration approach? And how do you both leverage that when you're doing your various projects and your systems?
It's a good question. Well, from my perspective, it's kind of both. I think what we're trying to do is manage ecosystems, but with certain species in mind. And my perspective is that when we create habitat, it helps diverse shorebirds, wading birds, waterfowl, in invertebrate communities, and has ecosystem impacts, even if we have focal species that help to guide the work. So I think, to me, you need to consider both particular species and ecosystems simultaneously.
Should I speak in English or Spanish?
I think either, whichever you would like.
Español. A mí me facilita, me hace el trabajo más fácil trabajar con una especie, porque al menos en los pastizales, cuando favoreces a una especie, eh, perjudicas a otra. Porque el pasto corto le gusta a algunas especies, pero no a todas. Entonces, a veces es como decir, bueno, ¿qué tengo que hacer? A veces es difícil visualizar eh, cuál es el lugar a donde queremos llevar el ecosistema, sobre todo en ecosistemas intervenidos, ¿no? No hay un consenso de cuál es, de cómo debería ser el estado de ese ecosistema o de sus distintos atributos, sobre todo en paisajes que vienen siendo usados por mucho tiempo. Entonces, a mí me resulta como más claro y directo trabajar con una especie porque uno sabe los requerimientos de esa especie y tiene más, puede definir acciones más bien concretas orientadas a esa especie, pero es cierto que uno puede estar desatendiendo otras especies u otros aspectos del sistema bueno, que también lo necesitan, ¿no? Entonces nosotros tratamos en definitiva, trabajamos con una especie, eso facilita, pero cuando podemos, obviamente, tenemos en cuenta otros aspectos del ecosistema.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. I think we have a few questions in the chat. Are you going to read those, Jason Logger?
Yeah, I can read them. There's a question from Tracy Bornman to Joaquín. It says, fascinating presentation, Joaquín. Muchas gracias. I was curious if installing fences has created any movement difficulties for larger wildlife species. The fences sound great for limiting livestock and assisting with habitat improvement for the sandpiper, but is there a trade-off where the fences have any negative effects for other wildlife species? Gracias.
Sí, en Uruguay no hay grandes mamíferos o grandes animales que puedan ser perjudicados por los alambres. Eh, los venados podrían verse perjudicados, pero no hay, o hay muy poquitos. Eh, la especie que sí vi que a veces se lastiman con los alambrados son los ñandú, el rea, rea. Sí. De todas maneras, los alambres que agregamos nosotros no, en términos relativos no mueven la aguja en cuanto a la longitud total de alambres que ya hay en los predios. Entonces no creo que estemos haciendo un impacto mayor al que ya existe.
Thank you, Joaquín. Okay, the next question goes to Jason from Santiago Munoz Bolaños. Jason, thanks for the great talk. I'm conducting similar work in the Cauca River Valley, Colombia, focusing on lesser yellowlegs. We're tracking approximately 24 individuals and studying macroinvertebrates in rice fields. Our goal is to work with rice farmers to ensure optimal habitat conditions during migration peaks. The question is, what are the most effective strategies you recommend for persuading producers to adopt these conservation-friendly management practices?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's really exciting to hear about your work, and I'd love to hear more about it. And we had one of our least sandpipers with a Modus tag ended up in Colombia not too long ago. So yeah, we have connections. I think from my perspective, persuading producers to adopt, there are a couple of things I would suggest, or at least from that have worked on our side. We've had to learn lessons, and it wasn't always easy. But first of all, we engaged with landowners through entities that they already trusted. In our area, the extension services of universities and also the NRCS, the USDA NRCS program, they have local conservation officers in each county. And in our area, those individuals are pretty well, they have good relationships with the local farmers. And so we started out by working through those offices to get their recommendations about which farmers to talk to first, who might be more open-minded. We have found that there's a lot of variation in the mindset of the landowners. Some of them are more set in their ways and don't have any interest in doing anything different, and others are more open, more interested in trying new things. And we got some really good recommendations to start out from people who knew them very well already. And those worked out. And in fact, I'll say there was one farmer we tried to work with that was not on that list of recommended farmers, and it turned out that was for a really good reason. And so we learned that trusting that sort of those local relationships that farmers already have, kind of leveraging that if possible, was a way to start. The other thing is that we found that just having face-to-face conversations and trying to meet people on the ground and just asking to talk and explain what you're trying to do and asking for their input and explaining your perspective, we've tried to prioritize that. And sometimes we've had trouble when we've kind of lost touch with our farmers a little bit, and it becomes just a contract, and it becomes just permission to visit the site. That's not enough, and that we need to prioritize taking time to engage face to face. And honestly, I spent a lot of time making phone calls to farmers and just talking to them and trying to understand their concerns and not dismissing them. So, but rather, and I think Joaquín really touched on this in some of the issues that they deal with, you need to listen to the farmers, listen to the landowners and what their concerns are, and try to work with them to find solutions that fit with the operations of the farm, the operations of the landowner. And it can't be one size fits all. You really have to be flexible and express that you are flexible, express that you're willing to work with them, that you want to try to find solutions rather than trying to dictate, here's what we want done, a priori. Yeah, those are my initial thoughts. But I wonder if Joaquín has other related thoughts, because that's a relevant question, I think, in his region as well.
Coincido, Jason, contigo, que es muy importante trabajar con los productores, adaptarse a sus realidades, aprender de ellos también. Uno aprende muchísimo de los productores, saben un montón. Y
Yeah.
también es interesante que existen abordajes metodológicos explícitos para trabajar con con los productores que hacen las... Hay metodologías, ¿no? Que marcan algunas pautas para, para desarrollar el trabajo con ellos. La dificultad que yo le veo a esta aproximación más como basada en el contacto directo y en el trabajo conjunto es que cuando uno quiere escalar estas acciones a grandes superficies, claro, es muy difícil ir a hablar con todos los productores, trabajar con todos los productores, entonces eso es uno de los desafíos que tenemos nosotros, al menos acá en Uruguay, es cómo escalar esta forma de trabajo.
I think we have time
Thank you
for
so
one more
much.
question. Oh, sorry, Tara and I are speaking at the same time. We're hoping to end right on the hour, but Jason, did you want to read any more from the chat, or does anyone want to come off mute to speak quickly?
Yeah, there are a couple of good questions in the chat, but it's hard to pick through them. So maybe we just keep going in order, and then we'll go. So there's a question for Joaquín from Gianco. It says, Joaquín, muy buena presentación. Tengo una pregunta relacionada a las características de los porteros. En ausencia de ganadería, existen otros herbívoros pueden mantener el pasto a niveles aceptables para los playeros, o en teoría perderían hábitat aceptable. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Jason. Good Spanish. You're improving. No hay otros herbívoros nativos hoy día. Antes sí habían más, por ejemplo, capibara, que podrían controlar la altura del pasto. Entonces dependemos esencialmente de la ganadería doméstica, pero también la inundación es un controlador de la altura del pasto. Cuando las lagunas crecen, inundan los pastizales, y si esa inundación dura algunos meses, el pasto que está abajo muere y cuando se va el agua empieza a crecer de nuevo el pasto. Por lo tanto, el pasto que está viniendo, que es corto, al menos por un tiempo. Entonces, la inundación también es un forzante, digamos, o driver de la altura del pasto. Gracias, Yanko.
Okay, so I think we're probably going to have to end it here. If folks want to connect with Jason and Joaquín over email, I don't mean to speak for you two, but I think they would welcome it. And one of our main goals for doing this webinar series is to connect each other here in these webinars, but also throughout time. So please feel free to connect with Jason and Joaquín, and to each of us, Tara, Kirsty, and Jason Logry, the three of us are organizing these webinars, and we welcome anyone's help. Our next webinar is going to happen in early 2026, probably March 2026, so keep an eye out for that announcement. And in the meantime, again, feel free to reach out to any of us with ideas or questions on how to get involved, and feel free to join our lists, or join the WHSG listserv, the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Group listserv, or our Discord channel, which I think Jason will post in the chat. So if anyone else wants to stay on after the hour, we can keep this open for a moment. You can come off mute, but I think our translator, Claudia, has to leave. We thank you so much, Claudia, for the incredible seamless translation into both English and Spanish today. We really appreciate it. And one more thanks to Jason and Joaquín for speaking today. You both were excellent, and we really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.